Welcome to Secret Story. My story starts on a mid-October night. I had just finished playing a show with my band in a nearby city. My wife had come to watch the show as usual. Unlike most of our shows which were late at night, this show was during the day. Normally we would ride together, but this time she had errands to run after, so we drove separately. After the show, I made my way home. As I drove, my mind was distracted by a fantasy I had been entertaining for some time. My wife's mother, Linda, was traveling through our city on her way to visit friends in Florida. We offered to let her stay with us for the day while she waited for her connecting flight that I knew she was coming, and I also knew I would be home alone with her until my wife was done with her errands. It was a forbidden lust, but I had been thinking about what it would be like to take her. It was a novelty fantasy that I never expected to come true. By the time I got home, my brain was lost in thoughts. I pulled into the driveway, saw her car, and my heart fluttered. After I parked, I made my way to the door. As I went, I had to adjust myself and pull my jacket lower to hide my visible excitement. That I took one deep breath to bring me back to reality before I opened the door. I went inside and was immediately greeted by Linda. "Hi," she said. "You made it," I said, closing the door and walking up the steps of our split-level home. As I reached upstairs, I saw her sitting on the couch watching TV. She was smiling and asked, "How did the show go?" She looked beautiful. She had always taken care of herself and been a fitness fanatic. It showed. You would never guess she was in her 50s. I let my eyes drift over her and did my best not to let them give away where I was looking. She was wearing a white blouse. The material was thin. She also wore tight jeans that were snug to her body and showed just how toned her legs were. Seeing her only made the visions in my head get more intense. "It went great," I said when I recovered my thought process. That I realized that I stared longer than I intended. She smiled back at me, and I could feel my face turning red. Her smile was mostly innocent. But there was a hint of something else in it. I couldn't help but worry that I had made the moment awkward for her. I was relieved when she stopped looking at me and went back to watching TV. "I am going to change," I said as I tried to change the subject. Truth be told, I wanted to go down the stairs and let my fantasy play out in my head before my wife got home. She looked at me, still with a slight smile, and said, "Okay." Her tone said she had thought nothing of what I'd done or said, but that smile was still there and it tormented me. Did she know? I walked down the steps into the basement, which we had turned into the master bedroom and my office for work. As I walked down the stairs, I went to unzip my jacket and realized that at some point between coming in the house and going down the stairs that I wasn't sure when that had happened, but I hoped it was on my way down the stairs. I felt a rush of worry that my mother-in-law may have just witnessed something unwanted, and I may have just created weirdness. That thought didn't last long and I shrugged off the idea. If she was uncomfortable, she would have let me know, which was my final thought on the matter. She had always been quite vocal about things that upset her, and she would have done something besides smile had she been offended. Or that's what I told myself. By the time I got to the bedroom, I had moved past my fears and started to focus on my fantasy again. I changed into my evening attire, PJ pants and a t-shirt. I was uncertain when my wife would be home, and with my mother-in-law upstairs, I didn't dare take care of my issue undressed. Instead, I sat at my desk and just let my mind wander. I am not sure how long I was in my chair, but my fantasies were playing in my head and I was lost in thought. My breathing had also started to get heavy. I enjoyed my thoughts. What time will Gina be home? The question jerked me out of my thoughts and caught me completely off guard. I did not do well at hiding my surprise. I sat up in my chair quickly and got up to face Linda. My intent was to show nothing going on here, but it had the opposite effect. As soon as I stood to face her, I realized my mistake. My PJ pants did nothing to hide. Linda's eyes immediately left mine, and she glanced down flustered and busted. I quickly covered myself. The only words I could get out were, I had to have looked like an idiot." Linda smiled again, but this time there was mischief in her expression. "Having problems?" She asked that it was strange, but the moment wasn't awkward. She was being playful, and it came across as teasing. "Sorry, I didn't hear you coming," was the only thing I could think of to say. She took a step towards me, still smiling, and asked again. "Do you know when Gina will be home?" "I'm not sure. It shouldn't be too long." "Maybe 30 minutes, I responded, still befuddled. She started to turn her body as if she was headed upstairs but then paused. "What has you so worked up?" she asked with that smile still on her face. She knew that I am not sure why I didn't say something like nothing or Gina, but instead, I blurted out, "You don't want to know." I chuckled as I said it at as soon as the words left my mouth, I realized their implications. She stopped and turned back toward me. Her smile changed from mischievous to something else. She was enjoying this and was not at all put off by it. Seeing her look at me made my heart race. Was this really happening? "Oh really?" she said as she turned back to face me. "Now I want to know." she asked and took another step toward me. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I just smiled. My head was racing. She looked amazing, and I wanted her, but even with her practically telling me she wanted to hear me say it, I still had this voice in my head that screamed to be careful. That I finally compromised my lust and my inner worried voice and said, "Let's just say you look good in that outfit." Linda was obviously pleased with my answer. "Really?" she said, and she glanced down at her body. She didn't need to look, she knew damn well she looked good. She had never shied from wearing outfits that showed off her curves. That I swallowed hard and confirmed, "Really?" I stood there like a dork. Thinking back, I keep going over how dumb I must have looked. But my head was lost. I often think of all the smooth things I could have said, but alas, "really" was all that came out. She took one more step towards me, and her expression changed. She didn't have the teasing smile I had seen earlier. Instead, there was a look of intrigue. "And I caused that?" she asked, letting her eyes drift to my center. That I took a deep breath. I no longer had that scared voice telling me to be careful. My head was lost in lust, and all I wanted was to taste her lips and pull her close. "You did." Again, I wish I had thought of something much more seductive to say. "What are you thinking exactly?" she asked, taking another step and raising an eyebrow. My mouth open but nothing came out. There was no way I could tell my mother-in-law the thoughts that were going through my head. She was now directly in front of me. I could smell her perfume, and it was intoxicating. I abandoned caution and let my eyes visibly trace over her body. I stared at her neck and worked my way down her body, taking in every detail. I then traced my view back to her face. That I and my peripheral vision, I could see her watching me as I took her in. There was a satisfied grin on her face as I did. When my vision did return to her face, we locked eyes. The air was thick with desire. I knew it, and she knew it. We both sat there for what seemed like a long time. We both wanted the same thing. Again, I stood there like an idiot. "If I don't know what the problem is, I can't help fix it," she said, raising an eyebrow. She was clearly teasing me now. "I want you." Again, my response was anything but smooth. She took a half step towards me and looked into my eyes. As she did that, I took a half step towards her and closed the distance. Still looking at me, she leaned closer and, feeling her soft body press against me was too much. And I abandoned restraint. That I released my hands and moved them to her wrists. As I did, my member pressed forward and came to rest against her body. The slight sensation took my breath, and she noticed that I let my palms rest against her outer arms and slid them up to her shoulders. Our eyes stayed locked until our faces met. The feel of her lips on mine was incredible. The first kiss was timid and almost a test to see if she would kiss me back. She did. One kiss turned into two, and then more. Each kiss was longer and more intense than the one before it. "Does this help?" she asked, looking at me shyly. Her voice had changed, and the question sounded beautiful. I gripped her shoulders and leaned my forehead against hers, still breathing erratically. I responded, God, that feels good. I hadn't really recovered, but I was able to control my breathing enough to kiss her again. We stayed there for a while, only the gods know how long. I could feel myself getting close to release. I backed away slightly and then raised my hands and pulled on her jacket. She held her arms to her sides, and the jacket fell to the floor. I grabbed her and pushed her against the nearest wall. I used my left hand to keep her against the wall, and I stood back for a moment. She kissed me one more time and then pushed me back slightly. I stepped back, unsure of why. She looked at me with a seductive look. They were absolutely gorgeous, firm and well-shaped. They were resting, just waiting for me to explore. She reached out to me and pulled me close again. More kissing. I paid attention every time she responded. I wanted to know exactly what she enjoyed. I wanted to please her as much as she was me, if at all possible. Her face was beautiful. I had reached the point of need and couldn't resist anymore. Gina is going to be home any minute, and I am not, she emphasized, getting caught my son-in-law. Her words were not a rebuke by any means, and the fact she struggled to say the words let me know this was not unwanted, that I was still breathing heavily. I wasn't sure what to do. My brain was desperate. What do we have time for? I thought. She smiled at me again, this time with a sly look. She brought her hand up to my chest and pushed me back slightly. I didn't resist and took a step back. My heart was racing at this point. I knew what she was going to do, and I needed it. She clearly knew what she was doing. I could feel myself as I moved closer and closer to release. My breath grew heavier. Became more frequent. I grabbed her hair and took control of her head. She did not protest. I wanted to make sure I could see if she was uncomfortable. But there were no signs of discomfort. It was heavenly. At one point I had to stop her. I'm close, I struggled to say. I wasn't sure if she would be willing to swallow the load I was about to release. There was no way I was going to do something that might jeopardize a future tryst that could result in what I really wanted. Just then, my phone buzzed. The sensation caught me off guard. Gina always lets me know when she was just about home. She would ask if I needed anything before she got there. I didn't need to check my phone to know what it meant. We have about 5 minutes. I was short of breath. Then we better hurry, Linda said with an evil grin. She reached for my hands and put them on her head again just before taking me. She almost giggled. I will. I warned one last time. She pulled back quickly and stood up. I would be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. She leaned in and started kissing me again. It was all I could do to stay standing. I felt as my body started to quiver. She continued to look into my eyes, now smiling with satisfaction that I exploded, and it was intense. She didn't try to get out of the way when a light came through the window. Gina was home. Linda shot me one more lustful look and then released me. She grabbed her jacket and, without a word, turned to walk upstairs. That I was still standing there, stunned. I was lightheaded, and my legs were rubber. At the bottom of the stairs, she turned and looked at me one more time. She smiled and then headed upstairs. Knowing I was short on time, I forced myself to move towards my PJ bottoms. Hello, Gina said cheerfully as she walked through the door. Linda was in the bathroom, redressing and cleaning up, if I had to guess. I tried to say hello back, but I was still struggling. My pants on. I had just made it to my chair when Gina came to check on me. Hello, she said again as she walked into the room. She looked confused. Hi baby, I said, trying to look normal. Where's Mom? She asked. Up here, Linda said, coming out of the bathroom. The rest of the night was strange. Gina and I stayed upstairs with Linda until she had to leave for the airport. It was like nothing had happened. She didn't give me any looks. It was business as usual. Even when she did leave, she gave us both a hug and headed out. It was platonic again, but, I still remember she said she didn't want to get caught, her son-in-law. The key word being caught. That is much different than her not wanting to her son-in-law. Let's hope there is a part 2 to this.